All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening on a Sunday evening. Thank you for joining. Very excited to host this. Actually, a lot of requests from parents to kind of understand how does the college admissions process work? What are the technical details behind this? How many projects do I need? How many essays do I need? How does this factor in, from a grading criteria, from a university perspective? So really excited to present today a couple of more technical details behind the college admissions journey. And also would like to introduce some of my team members a little bit later in the call. The call is going to be about 30 minutes. If you have any questions, just type it into the chat. More than happy to answer that. No question is a bad question when it comes to college admissions. It is a very daunting process and, happy to answer anything. So just about today's talk, what the purpose is, we're going to talk a little bit about real student examples, what has worked, what has not worked, where profiling has actually trumped grades, where grades have trumped profiling, and how that kind of matters. If you guys are interested, my colleague Millie, who will join the call shortly, will also share a free IV guide that we created. It's about 20 to 30 pages. It's really about how to kind of differentiate your profile from other students. And it's been reviewed by 17 admissions officers. So a little bit about myself. I'll keep this short. My name's Davy. I've personally worked with over 1,000 students in the past 7-8 years. Very passionate about understanding what makes a student tick, how to find that authentic interest in a student. I'm ex-Goldman Sachs. I worked in investment banking in the M&A division in New York City. And I graduated from Georgetown University. Today, I sit on Georgetown University's board. I also sit on the AAP recruiting board, which means I help position, students with interviewees and so forth. And I'm going to touch a little bit upon, what an interview means from a US perspective as well. And I also work very closely with other universities and hold talks in the past at Purdue, at Yale, and a couple of other schools as well. If you have specific school questions, I will request you guys to push that to another webinar where we will go through, what types of profiles different universities really look for, because that's another topic altogether. So I would love to introduce my team. So Ethan is on the call. He is our chief of staff, and he heads over 130 teachers. And then Millie, who will be joining soon, she heads our UK office, and she's really the person to talk to if you have any questions about, what program should my kid be doing or anything like that. And then, of course, we have Faiza, who is our head college counselor. She's been doing this for almost 11 years, and she has had a lot of success, especially last week in the early decisions, as you guys might have heard, for a lot of the universities. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. How does the US, so when your child submits their application, how does that actually get placed into a university? The first really important thing to note, and a lot of parents ask me this, is your child, or if you're a kid, you are not competing with a global competition. You are competing based on your geography and a lot of times with your school. So what typically happens is, what typically happens is when your child's application gets to university, let's say it gets to Boston University, a subcommittee of the full admissions committee is responsible for that initial evaluation. The same subcommittee will review all other applications from that same geography. Because the same reader and the same subcommittee is reviewing all those applicants, those admissions officers will be familiar with the school's grading practices, academic rigor, recommendation styles, all of which help to give a fair and consistent evaluation. And that's really important because a lot of parents tell me, oh, well, this child in London is doing this, or this child in, Switzerland is doing this. That's not really your competition. You're really looking at your geography. That is one of the reasons why in Singapore, for example, we have one of the lowest Ivy League amenities. So some universities also rank high schools based on precedent data. This is a bit of a different point. It just means that some universities have better relationships with different schools. So I'll give you guys an example. University of Columbia, right? It ranks 6 schools. It'll rank UWC, SAS, Tanglin, Nexus, and XCL. That's not the ranking, it's just an example. But what that means is they're more likely to take more students from UWC, more students from SAS than the final schools that I mentioned. How is this ranking determined? It's actually quite ridiculous, but it's determined based off precedent data. So if I'm Columbia University and I admit 10 kids from UWC, and of those 10 kids in the past, let's say 2 years, they get accepted and they go to Columbia. So it's a 10 out of 10 acceptance rate, and the kids do agree to go to Columbia. That means my ranking is going to be really, really high. So this is something that kids actually don't know, and there's no way of really knowing what your ranking is, but pay attention to your school and what universities your school typically gets into. For example, SAS, a lot of Northeastern University admittees, right? So pay attention to those trends, because those trends are actually sharing some information. Okay, so what's important to US universities? As a kind of a wholesome point, there's 6 things. There's your academics, there's your extracurriculars, there's your athletics, personal, which I will explain, your recommendation letters, and your interviews. Your academics, it's really a baseline. It's just getting your foot in the door. If you think of a big house and that entrance of the house being a gate, and to enter the house, it's like a university, just opening the gate, that's your academics. So having good academics, it's really sort of the baseline, or at least showing a trend in your academics, showing a strong increase. So, if students come to me with really, really poor grades for 4 years straight, and they want to supplement that with a profile, that's really hard to do. But if they come with a trend and a story and they want to supplement that with a profile, that's possible. Then we have ECAs, right? Extracurriculars. Who are you outside of school? This is your biggest source of differentiation, and this is also the biggest opportunity in my books. Then we have athletics, so any type of sports that you do. Again, this is not mandatory, but this is something that's a very good to have for a US university. If you're part of softball, if you're part of basketball, and you have some sort of leadership position, this is always a plus in the US. And I should have said this earlier in the call, I will only be focusing on US universities for today's call. Then we have personal. Personal is really about what the narrative of the student is. Who is the student outside of school, outside of ECAs? What makes the student tick, right? And I'm going to walk you guys through a really strong example of this. Then we have recommendation letters and interviews. These 2 pieces are actually more important than a lot of people think. A lot of people think recommendation and interviews is sort of just you have to have that. But if you're on the cusp, and when I say cusp, I mean if a university is on edge whether to accept you or not, and these 2 things look really, really good, chances are they will accept you. Your recommendation letter comes from 2 sources, so usually 2 teachers at your school, or maybe it's an internship supervisor, or it's your basketball coach, someone that knows you really well and is able to display in words who you are, who your character is, and how you can contribute to the school. And I can share, if you guys are curious, some recommendation letter styles as well. Unfortunately, this is not always up to the student, because this gets sent directly from the teacher to the university. Then we have interviews. Interviews is an interesting one. A lot of kids come to me and said, oh, I have an interview, but it's not that important, etc. I really disagree with that, because I think interviews, if you're on the cusp, again, can really only add to your application. I have a funny story on interviews. I met a student, so I've been interviewing for about 7 years for my university. And I met a student who was like, oh, Georgetown University is, not really my first choice. It's more like my last choice. She said that in the interview. And those are things you just can't say, even if it's true. It's interview etiquette and preparing for the interview, super, super important. Okay, switching gears a little to the rating system. This is really interesting. So, and this happens by and large for every single US university. You get rated out of basically 1 being the best and 6 being the worst, out of different points for each of those 6 categories that I mentioned. Most kids will fall into this range, neutral, respectable, or maybe a 3. Super hard to fall into the 1 range, which is, exceptional, a clear admit with very strong objective and subjective support. So I would say most are between 4 to 3. Now, if you prepare really well, you prepare early and you have, what it takes, then you will be between 2 to 3. 1 is super, super rare, but I will show you guys how to get to 1. And sorry, one more point on here is that you can actually be between points, right? So the most important thing to understand here is that an applicant score isn't an average of the scores in all of the areas, but rather some categories can be more important than the others. So let's say you have really, really good academics and really good ECAs, but you have 0 athletics. You can still get between a 2 and 3. Okay, so it's not every category matters in terms of how they look at this. It really matters in terms of what's the strength. If they're really, really strong, then they can kind of look over the fact that there are no academics. So how is academics split? Again, this is a huge question. Parents ask me, what sort of subjects should my kid be doing? How important is GPA? How important is subject selection, college level courses, etc. Academics is split into 4 categories. So you have your overall GPA. Your GPA, for those that aren't familiar, is your grade point average. Your grade point average is calculated from grade 9 to grade 12. The higher that is, usually that's scored out of 4.0, so 4 points, the higher that is, the better. Some schools do inflated GPA, some schools underflate the GPA. Again, this is a school-specific thing. Then you have high school rigor. Now, high school rigor is actually, what else are you doing outside of school academically? Are you writing research papers? I have a student on the call today who's actually just publishing a book. What else are you doing in terms of academics to showcase that you're academically interesting? Some students, they do college level courses in the summer, they take online courses, they try to showcase a stronger academic interest. Then we have academic awards. These are awards that are either school awards or either outside of school awards that showcase some kind of academic interest, top math Olympiad or writing competition winner or creative, poetry writing winner. And if you guys want a list of different opportunities like this, we can send that over as well. And then finally, we have standardized tests. This is the most controversial topic of college admissions right now. And I know this because we had a meeting with the International Admissions Officers Counselors a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of people are just really over the whole standardized tests. This is a subjective one, but my personal opinion is, if you are applying to university and you have 1, 2, 3, and you have everything else, why not take the SAT and see whether you can do well, or the ACT? If you can, it's just an extra data point to your college profile. It's an extra little something, right? If I have 2 profiles next to me and they look the same, I have profile A and profile B, the grades are exactly the same, the resume is exactly the same, but one of them has SAT of 1600 and the other one has no SAT. Who would you choose? I would choose the second one because I have an extra data point. So this is something to consider. This doesn't apply to every student, okay? This is something to really look at a case-by-case basis. Some students of mine are excellent in IB, but they're very poor test takers. So in those cases, I would say don't take the standardized test. How does this work from a rating perspective? Very similar. So colleges are looking whether you can fit into one or two. So summa potential, summa cum laude, it's the highest honor in a US university system, which means that you have a GPA above a 3.9, which is really, really hard to achieve. So this is, a genuine scholar, near perfect scores, combined with unusual creativity and evidence of original scholarship. These are things like writing research journals, research papers, writing books, showcasing that you're taking a craft in academia and pushing it further, right? I have a student now. She started a website called Meno Unite, and she's basically writing different research papers on that website on menopause. And she's sharing that to a community of underprivileged women. She wants to democratize the way information and research and scholarship is spread about the topic menopause. Why? Because she feels that it's an area that not many people talk about. It's an area that is not so focused on, and it really should be. And she just got an ED, by the way. She got an early decision admission yesterday. So these are the kind of things we look for, right? Then there's magna potential, which is, obviously the second one, magna cum laude. These are really good students too. And these are the students with, 33 plus ACT. ACT is out of 36 points. So 33 out of 36. And then, the SAT is out of 1600 or 800. So 700 out of 800. So again, the bottom line with academics is do what you can at school, but see how you can complement that a little bit. And this is actually another quick point I want to give is that many students who get a 33 on their ACT or 1500 on the SAT, they say, oh, I want to do it again. I want to do it again. Instead of that, just do something else that showcases interest in academia. And I'll show you guys an example. So this is a student of ours. He has IB economics, a 7 out of 7. And in computer science, he has a 6 out of 7. So he, instead of improving the computer science to 7 out of 7, what he decided to do was write a research paper on the impact of historical and ongoing technological advances on economic inequality. He got that published on the research journal, which is usually quite competitive to get it published. It's online. And he used that as a way to get a research shadow with a partner at IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and a professor at Georgetown University. So he used his weakness in computer science. He supplemented that in a weakness in quotes, he supplemented that and he wrote an amazing research paper, got a work shadow, got it reviewed by this professor, and now it's part of his application. Same thing, got a Oxford interview and St. Andrews acceptance just last night. So these are things, and the reason, guys, I'm showing these examples is because, this week and last week are very important weeks in the early decision application cycle for the US. So as and when we are getting these results, we will share these with you so you can see how they're being understood, how they're being interpreted. And unfortunately, there's a lot of strategy to college admissions. And by the way, guys, this is all the slides can be given if you guys email Millie. If Ethan, you can pop Millie's email on the chat, that would be awesome. And please have a conversation with her, and we can share everything that's helpful. Okay, so this is an example on the. Oops. Oh, this is his research paper. I can send that to you guys as well. Okay. Sorry. Sorry, guys, my Canva just froze me. Okay, this should work. Sorry, guys. I'm usually never the one that shares my screen, and now I'm realizing there's a reason for that. Okay, so extracurriculars. I recently had a chat with one of my friends who's a senior admissions officer at UPenn to talk a little bit about extracurriculars, because again, we get this question a lot. How important are extracurriculars? How much in depth do we have to go? How many years does my child have to go into extracurriculars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So there are three things to note. When we talk about extracurriculars, admissions officers are really looking at 3 points. One is your interest. What are you interested in? Are you interested in writing, singing? What clubs, what passion projects, what summer programs have you done, right? The second is your engagement. How have you contributed to the community? How have you contributed? How have you contributed to, your the service industry? How have you added value, right, from an engagement perspective? And I'm going to show you a really cool example of this in a second. And then third, have you done a job? Have you had any internships? Have you done anything for your family? Have you done anything from a sustainability perspective, right? So that's what they're looking for. Again, I know super broad, and I'm going to break it down. This is a student who managed to kind of hit all three, okay? She is based in Indonesia. She's now at Northwestern University. She got into 7 out of 10 universities that she applied to. And her passion was basically sustainability and saving as much food as possible. So when she was in 10th grade, she said, I'm going to go to different restaurants in Indonesia and see whether I can take the food that's wasted and actually combine that food in a pot. And every week I can donate it to an underprivileged community. Within 2 years, she donated 123,000 pieces of bread, $35,000 of food, and partnered with 38 orphanages. That's impact. That's showing service. That's showing leadership. That's showing a whole bunch of things, but that's also showing tangible, quantifiable impact, right? And this is a student, by the way, who was amazing academically, but not a good test taker, did not take the SAT optional. So there are ways to kind of strategize through that. So maybe just before that, going back to that previous slide, 2 important questions admissions officers will ask when they look at your profile, when they look at your resume. Can you contribute to this university? That's 1. And 2, is what you've done anything to do with leadership? Those are the 2 most important things. And if the answers are yes to both, then that's already showing a green flag. Okay, super important point, context. So a lot of students do the right things. They do the right projects, they get the right grades, they get the right SATs. But when it comes to filling out the application form, they have no idea how to fill it out. They have no idea what activities to write, how to write the activities. You only get a few characters to talk about every single activity that you've done. And so using those characters well, super, super important. So this is a typical activity common application. For those that aren't familiar, common application is the application that you have to send across most US universities. It's one application. The activities is one application. The essays vary per university, but the activities is one document. So this student, for example, you will see that in this document, you have to write what the activity name is. So music, instrumental. You have to say how many years you've done it. Have you done it in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade? You have to say how many hours per week, how many weeks per year. So you kind of have to go into quite detail, right? Then you have to write what the activity is, what your position was, right? And then, very important, guys, you have to explain what that scope is, but use quantifiable numbers, right? So drum major for 80-member band, charting halftime shows, conducting for football and basketball games. Here you can see speech and debate team, vice president, I coached 5 underclassmen in debate and helped organize 2 on-campus debate events. This is showing me numbers. This is showing me impact. This is showing me accomplishments. A lot of kids, I've seen so many kids get this part wrong, and that has ruined their application. I saw a student a couple of years ago who did this section on her own, and she was pretty much a 3.7 GPA, so relatively good student. She got into 2 or 3 universities. So this part is critical. If you have more questions on this part, more than happy to answer as well. So the point of the slide is, can you really paint a picture for the admissions officer? And what you've done is not nearly as important as how you write about it, how you present it, how you market it. Super critical. Okay, so coming back a little bit into extracurriculars, if you are thinking, should my child do this extracurricular or not? It's a good idea to think about, 6 tick marks or 6 kind of sanity checks. One is there going to be some type of commitment? Is there going to be some sort of long-term commitment, right? Is it just 1 summer, or is it 2 summers, or is it 3 summers? 2 is, what is the impact? Can we quantify this impact? If we can't quantify this impact, then maybe it's not the right activity at all. Community-driven is really important, and a lot of kids get this one wrong too. A lot of kids do small service projects, fundraisers and things like that. But if you're aiming for the top universities, think of something impactful, right? Think of something that really breaks the mold. I'll give you guys an example. I have a student now. She started a website. I can show you guys actually. It's called Teach the Teachers. You see my screen? Let me just try again. Oops. Okay. It's called Teach the Teachers. And basically she interviews different teachers around the world, and she records those videos, puts them into nice edited, musical videos, and on very important topics like how to motivate unmotivated students or balancing teaching and life. And she donated these videos to 40 nonprofit schools. Her name is Kate, and she's going to university in a few years. Actually, no, she's going to university in the coming year. So she's in 11th grade. So my point is that really, really adds value. So community driven. Then we have skill set. There's some parents, and I love these kind of parents, who are like, I really just care about the skills my kids are building. And by the way, if you focus on this piece, more likely than not, they're going to be also these pieces, right? Is my kid developing confidence? Is my kid developing self-esteem? Is my kid taking life skills and translating it into her academia, into her life? I know a student here who's on the call who, over the past year, has dramatically improved her soft skills. She's dramatically improved how to present herself, her self-esteem, her time management, her organization. She did an internship with Ascend Now last summer, and so much so that she was leading some of the meetings. And so I share this story because I think that once these skills get developed, it will show in other places. And believe me, and you will see that. I had a parent recently say, like, I want my child to do a passion project, but I want you guys to decide the passion and outline it and everything. But isn't that the opposite of the point of a passion project? It's for the interest to come from the child, and we will help structure it. So, this part is a really important one to think about as well. Then, of course, there's leadership. Universities love leadership in any way and every way. It doesn't have to be you're the VP of a basketball team. You could show leadership in your passion project. You could show leadership by trying to impact an industry that has never been impacted. And then there's proactivity, finding unique opportunities, right? And how do we find that, in an interesting way? A couple of months ago, we had a webinar with Yale, and one of the points that the Yale admissions team mentioned was they look at this question: would the person be a good roommate, a good dinner partner, focused on helping others? So it's not only about grades. Okay, similarly to the other rating systems, you have rating systems with your ECAs. Again, you should be looking at, 1, 2, 3. So 1 is unusual strength in one or more areas, possible national level achievement, a potential major contributor to Harvard. This is just an example, but it's applied to all universities. 2 is strong secondary school contribution in one or more areas, such as class president, newspapers. I would say that most ambitious students, they fall between 2 to 3. And different universities prioritize ECAs in different ways. So I will say that if you have a choice, participate in international competitions versus national competitions, because it's just stronger from a rating system. And I would say that less is more. Do things in depth, do them well, instead of doing 30 activities. A lot of kids don't know that the US only allows you to submit 10 activities. So if you're doing 30 activities, it's not going to get shown anywhere. So coming back to that previous point on, it's not so much as important as what you do, but how you explain what you've done. Okay, so yeah, I told you guys the big takeaways here. How to turn a hobby into an activity. Try to make it impactful. Try to dream big. One of the things I constantly see is that students are actually highly ambitious. They're just a bit scared, a little fearful. So remove that fear from your decision and try to impact a larger community. And if you think from that big perspective, then you will achieve that. Max duration just means ensure that it's not just an activity for, ninth grade or 11th grade or 12th grade. Try to show continuity, right? And then, of course, tangible impact. Okay, I get this question a lot, like, how do I find my kid's sphere, my kid's spike? What is the difference, etc.? The main difference is that sphere is just you're kind of doing everything, but there's no unifying narrative, there's no unifying theme. Whereas spike is there's a unifying narrative and a story in the student's application. This one is really hard to explain, and I might save this one for another webinar. But the point of the slide is that, yes, colleges want well-rounded kids, but they also want students with a unique story, with activities that speak something different, right? And I'll show you guys a quick example of that if I can move to the next slide. So this is an example of a student's activity list, okay? And this is the same student that got into 7 out of 10 universities. So these were some of her activities. So one is she founded a service club in a school and it grew to 40 members. She helped 300 local weavers improve their sales by over 80%. Again, impactful, numerical, right? The numbers don't have to be crazy. They can even be much smaller than this, guys, but they just have to show impact. You can see here, started a pre-loved fashion store on Instagram. I achieved 3,000 followers, 324 units, and achieved a revenue of this. Then this was her, food flip project, food redistribution with 7 retailers, orphanages, and 2,300 kids. Then you can see, basketball, JV, National Honor Society, research paper. Again, this was done strategically because we did not have a great grade in English, right? In our AP English test. And then she did a Wharton competition with a couple of her teammates. We organized that, I think, in 9th or 10th grade. But you can see that here it's showing a little bit of story. She's interested in finance, she's entrepreneurial, but she's also very impact driven. She's pioneering in the way that she is. So you can see there's some sort of narrative going. And yet the activities are different enough that it's showing that she's well-rounded. It's a hard one to strike a balance between wholesome and well-rounded, but also unique narrative. And I'm going to have to move that topic for another webinar, but just note that if, you have any questions on this particular topic, just, keep your eyes out for some more detail on this. But how to know this narrative and things like that, start early. Every parent asks me, is 12 years too early to start? 13 years? My answer is always no. If I had children myself, they would start at 10, 11 years old, not in terms of their applications, but just in terms of their projects, in terms of, kind of getting them interested in different areas, exposure, knowing what they're interested in, what they're not interested in. Because one important thing, most parents probably know this, and I don't know if the kids on this call know this, but your creativity levels from ages 0 to 10 are about 90%. And from 10 to 14, they go down to 60%. From 14 to 18, they go down to something like, I think, 30% or 20%. So when your kids are very creative, use that, give them exposure. I have a student who's 10 years old. He developed an online app to send groceries for old people here in Singapore, and he sold that app for something like $12,000 to a gaming company here. So again, this is a parent who came to us and just said, I want to give my child exposure. And, he's now doing amazing things. So I want to encourage that for all parents. Then we have the personal side to this. This is the most subjective area. This is really about beyond extracurriculars, beyond academics. Who is the student? What is unique? Have they shown concern for the community, equity, public-mindedness? How have they shown this? And this is an area that most parents are like, how do I start, right? How do I get there? So I'll give you an example of a student who had no idea when to start or where to start, and this is what he achieved. So his name is William. He's now just started at Boston College, which last year had an acceptance of something like 9%. So not Boston University, but Boston College. And he took one of our entrepreneurship courses, which is, again, a great thing for like younger kids. So he took one of those courses I think he was in 9th grade. And, he learns about economics and finance and marketing. And when he was in finance, something clicked. He was like, wow, this is so interesting. Why don't I teach underprivileged kids finance? The concept of saving and compound interest and credit cards, those are the people that really should know about this. And so that's what he did. He started, Operation Drip, which is a weekly online webinar on financial literacy. And the people that join the webinar are underprivileged kids in Indonesia. They didn't have laptops, so he went around and started getting laptops donated from different tech stores in Indonesia, and now he has 8 different villages that have 8 laptops, and he hosts these webinars every week. He just joined university, and he still does this project. Remember when I was talking about skills and skill development? This shows an example of a student who he started this project in order to kind of get a spike or get a passion, but he enjoyed it so much that he continues it. Okay, to kind of close it up, the recommendation letter, again, this is something not so much within your control, but there is a ranking for that as well. Most schools, and I assume most of you guys your kids go to top schools, they don't have an issue with this. My only recommendation here, guys, is try to choose a teacher that really knows your child well. Not someone that will just write a random sort of like very superfluous recommendation letter, but rather that knows your child's story. Meet them for coffee, have the child meet them, and explain to them what their journey was. That's a really huge mistake I see. Okay, so in terms of recommendation letters, the other tip I will give you guys is ask your teachers early. If you're in 10th grade or if you're in 11th grade and you already click with a teacher, already ask them, hey, by the way, I'm going to be submitting my application next year. I just have you on my letter of recommendation list. Could I have you there? And most of the time, the teacher will say yes. So there shouldn't be an issue at all. But do inform your teachers. Build a genuine relationship with your teachers. Make sure that they know you on a personal note. So I think that's something I would recommend on the recommendation letter. So to conclude, I I share this chart because it's an example of a student's journey who is more STEM related, so who's more interested in science and math. And these are the things the child has been doing at age 10, age 12, age 14, 12, you know. So depending on what your child's interested in, like whether it's humanities or writing or robotics or engineering, you know, there are different kind of pathways they can take. And these are not like pathways they have to take, these are just things to think about. Um, but to conclude, yeah, start early, I think, is something I would really recommend. You know, and maybe this one, which I haven't talked about too much, but just being authentic. Every child has a passion, every child has something that they're really excited about. We just need to find that. And if we can find that, then the sky is the limit, honestly. So try to find that and try to encourage your child to, you know, meet your friends as parents and communicate with them and really have that strong open relationship with, because chances are most kids are interested in something. I have not met a kid ever in the past few years of doing this who's interested in nothing. So that should be, you know, motivation enough. um, and the fourth piece of this, I didn't talk about this a lot, networking. You know, whether you're networking with your teachers to kind of get recommendation letters, whether you're networking with people from universities that come to your campus for different, you know, university fairs, it's important to have good people skills. I would say the US looks more at people skills than the UK, so that's something to also pay in mind. We had a student a couple of years ago. She met one of the Yale University board advisors, and she worked with him as a mentor for about 4 years from ninth grade onwards. And now she's in her third year at Yale. So this is just something to kind of keep in mind. I see a couple of questions, and someone raised their hand. Ethan, do you see the question? I saw someone raise their hand, or maybe I didn't. Liliana, sorry, did you have a question? No.
Apologies, I can't see anyone with their hand
Oh,
raised at the moment. But folks, please feel free to ask any questions either in the chat or if you'd like to ask it just naturally, that's perfectly fine as well. Debbie will get to it, or any other one of us here is happy to help answer as well if we're better prepared for that at the same point in time. All yours right now, folks.
I have a question here sent directly to me. How do I know what subjects my child should choose if they're in eighth grade? Should they do GCSE or MYP? Okay, this is a really good question. For those that aren't aware, GCSE and MYP are two curriculums that occur at the same ages, which is ninth grade, 10th grade for each. The GCSE or the Cambridge curriculum is slightly less essay writing oriented. It's more, some of it is multiple choice, some of it is essay writing, whereas MYP, middle year program, has more essay writing components to it. And I would say is generally a better foundation if your child is to enter IB. So we'll do more sessions in terms of how to choose your curriculum and things like that. But those are sort of the you know, some of the things to watch out for. Vasilia asked a question on Q&A. Does IB or AP matter for college application? Good question. So IB or AP matter? Yes, your course load matters, your course rigor matters, but some of the students don't go to schools that offer IB or AP. For example, one of the best boarding schools in the US, Andover, Phillips Andover Exeter, doesn't offer IB, doesn't offer AP. They just offer their own curriculum. So it's okay not to actually take those curriculums. That being said, if your school offers it and your child doesn't take it, then usually it's not a really good strong point for a university, because the university will say, well, if your child, you know, if your child had the option, why did they not take it? AP and IB are very different. IB is more essay writing, it's more analysis, it's more internals, much more comprehensive, and I think a very strong curriculum, but there's a lot of work to do. AP is more short answer, multiple choice questions, slightly more straightforward. So it depends how your child is geared. See another question here. Is it too late to take professional help for college admissions in the middle of grade 11? I don't think it's ever too late. I do think sometimes we have students that come to us at grade 12 and we think that that is too late. But preferably earlier, grade 10, grade 9 is a time to start thinking, at least for the US. If your child is focused on Europe or the UK, I don't think that you need a counselor. I think the system is quite straightforward that a counselor is not needed. And by the way, this goes out to everyone on the call. You don't actually really need a counselor for any of this. If you know the system, if you know how it works, how to strategize it, there is no necessity for the counselor. Sometimes parents prefer a counselor to structure it out to make sure the student feels motivated and has a good balance and has a mentor, but it's not necessary. Okay, another question here. What about caring for mental health of these students? From Frida. Yes, thank you for that question. It's really hard to be a student in this atmosphere. I grew up in Belgium. I didn't have a tutor. It was not even a common thing. And, in this atmosphere and this competitive landscape, it can be really, really difficult. I think that ultimately having students know who they are, having that self-awareness, where they want to go, being in the driver's seat, not putting too much pressure on themselves, and trying to do what they can to achieve their potential, it's a really fine balance. We had a student who got into one of the best boarding schools a couple of years ago, and Ethan and I worked with her, and we just found out a couple of months ago that she's, been diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And so these things students can really take at heart and maybe not show, right? So I think there's nothing more important than mental health and doing things that where students are happy. Like I have another student who's now at Northwestern and he's not happy. He spent all these years preparing for Northwestern and now he wants to transfer to another university that's less intensive. So finding your correct match, finding a match where you're going to be happy, super, super important. I see a question from my student. Can academic progress compensate for poor grades in earlier years? Yes, Raisa, absolutely yes. Show a trend, show a journey, show a pathway. If you can show that, you can write about that, it's really always a good idea. Question from Emily. Some US universities said test optional. Is it really optional or we do it anyway? Does it help? I think this depends on the student. There's some students I would say don't take it because everything is perfect. And if they take it and they're not good test takers, we wouldn't want to submit it and it's a waste of time. I think the answer really depends. If I'm looking at it objectively, I would say probably do it. If you do well, use it. If you don't do well, don't submit the SAT. The SAT gives you an option to not submit it to the university. So that's something you can definitely do.
Debbie, can we go to Amy right now? I'm just going to allow her to talk, but she's got her hand up. So, Amy, if you've got your question, go for it right now.
Hi, I just wanted to know if you assist the kid in taking up projects, writing research paper, and internships.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Amy. We help in terms of research papers. We can help get those published, connect to academic journals that do that. In terms of internships, it depends. We have some partnerships with companies that allow for some online internships. But on the whole, we help advise on internships. We don't guarantee internships. But research papers, yes, we've had kids published on Barnes and Nobles. One of the kids, or actually two of the kids on this call are to be published on Barnes and Nobles. And they have one is an essay book coming out and one is a nonfiction piece. So yeah, absolutely. That's something we can help with. If you're interested, Ethan can pop at Millie or his contact info and, more than happy to help.
Absolutely. I've popped Millie's in, but I'll pop it in again at the end for everyone, folks. So just that you know that it's there, and we'll go from there. Sound okay?
Awesome. Thank you. Question from Krish. Is there a sport where excelling holds greater significance for US universities? Good question. Yes and no. It depends on the university again. Some universities, for example, are looking for more soccer players and equestrian, like horse riders, in terms of sports recruiting. So yeah, if you do more of that and you apply to the universities that, you know, are looking for students in those sports, then yes. On the whole, if you're applying from a purely general application perspective, then the answer is no. But if you're applying from a sports recruiting application, which is a different application altogether, then the answer is yes. So if you want to know more about sports applications, to Krish, happy to share more about it. It's a completely different process. So the way it works is different scouts go to different high schools, and then you have to build what's called a sports recruiting profile. So you have to share, you know, I've played basketball, here are some videos of my basketball highlights. You know, you know, I've been doing this for 4 years, and this is how it's been. It's called I'll send you the name, but it's called an ISAC. It's a sports recruiting profile that gets sent to all universities. Question from Raisa. What kind of ECAs are more useful than others? Good question. Useful, I would say those where you can get leadership positions in, that's one. And two, ECAs that are generally interesting to you, right? If you're part of the newspaper and you write a really interesting piece on, you know, democratizing information for teens, for example, right? That could be a good ECA. Or if you do something with MUN and you end up publishing a short essay in MUN, that could be good too. So it really depends on what you're passionate about and how you showcase that passion. But good question. I would say avoid the standard ECAs, or at least you can do a few, but don't do too many of those mundane ECAs. And also some kids ask me, like, how many ECAs should I do at school? How many should I do at home alone? I would say do like 4 to 6 at school and maybe 4 on your own. And the 4 on your own could be, one could be an internship, one could be a research paper or a book, another could be maybe an entrepreneurship project. You know, the sky is the limit in terms of what we do.
Debbie, just following on from that, are there any kind of ECAs that we should be avoiding?
I wouldn't say avoid. If they're generic ECAs that you are genuinely not interested in and you're just doing it for your profile, I would say don't do it. That's the short answer. MUN to me doesn't hold much weight. This is a subjective answer, by the way. But I think if you do MUN, try to do something that's leadership oriented with MUN. Model United Nations. But outside of that, I think every ECA has some benefit. Try to achieve leadership or something interesting. Try to do something interesting within that ECA.
Thanks, Debbie. Just another question we had actually is more related to homeschool students as well. For instance, they might not have faculty that can offer a recommendation letter. There's no formal extracurriculars either. Do the requirements change when it comes to that? Is there any leniency or are they subject to the same sort of factors in those same percentages that you showed to us at the beginning as well?
Sorry, Ethan, I missed the first part of that. Can you just repeat the first question, please? The first part, please?
Just when it comes to homeschoolers, because there's no formal extracurriculars or faculty to offer recommendation letters, does anything change in the college application process for them?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We have I think about maybe 5-7% of our students are homeschooled, Ethan, something like that. But it's with homeschooling, I think the recommendation letter needs to be more strategic, because you have, you know, obviously you have teachers that you're working with online or perhaps at home. It needs to be a little more strategic. What colleges are looking for particularly from homeschool students is how their ECAs are even more unique, right? How are they getting involved in the community? So I would say if you're a homeschooling student, and this is what I advise to all my homeschooling kids, is try to do something community oriented or service oriented to show that there is a social component in your life and you're still getting involved. Or try to do something with other teens. Like we have one homeschooling student in Trinidad, Rebecca, and she's in 9th grade, and she started her own newspaper where she collects different student perspectives on various topics, right? Something like student voices. And, that's her project, that's her ECA. So I would say it's a mix between finding things that your kid is genuinely interested in, but also trying to find ways where your kid can really contribute to the community, because they're homeschooled and they're technically not really ingrained in the community from a schooling standpoint. Try to think of those opportunities.
Thanks, Debbie. Another one of the questions that's been asked, just as we push forward, is with regards to competing in a particular geography. Do they only compete with other students from their school and geography that are competing for a specific course in a university, or is it competing for the general university regardless of the course?
Great question. Usually it's the general for the general university, irrespective of the course. That being said, if it's a course like MIT computer science, they might pull you in within that geography of kids that only apply to computer science. But generally, a rule of thumb, it's within all across majors. And this is another question we get from students and also parents is, okay, should I apply to an easier major because it's easier to get into, and then I can transfer to another program that I'm more interested in? Very recently, we had a student apply to University of Virginia, which has an excellent business program in the business school called McIntyre, but she applied for a general major, I think something like economics or English, and then she transferred to the business school. This is a strategy you can apply for, but keep in mind that transferring to another school is not always that easy. You'll have to maintain a certain GPA, etc. So just something to keep in mind.
Thanks, Debbie. Just as we sort of start to wrap this up a little bit, can you give us a bit of what do you think here in terms of, do you think it's better to go for prioritizing academic performance, or do you think prioritizing soft skills is better at this point in time?
Yeah, the short answer is like life skills is more important for life and for your success in life. Unfortunately, academics are still very important for university. So I would say both are important, but I do think, and I've always been of this perspective, and a lot of people disagree with me, but I do think that if you have a really unique spike or storyline or narrative and your grades are okay, you still have a good shot at getting into good university because you're showing an interesting person. And a lot of the resumes, especially that I see, like with my work with Georgetown, they look very similar to me. Students do something with fundraising and service, or they do something with their, school newspaper. They're not doing anything out of the box. So that's why when I see projects like, that student that we had, Portia, right? Internet, democratizing internships for high school kids. Or when most recently I saw a student that's not within, that I haven't worked with, but I was reviewing her profile, and she wrote a research paper on the mindset of athletes and how that changes over time. So she compared like Muhammad Ali to some of the basketball players of this generation. And she wrote a research paper about that. And I thought, wow, that's quite interesting. So I think that the answer is both. Time management is the main thing for, like, it's one of the most important skills, not only for life, especially for high school. Especially for high school. I've seen kids that are super smart, bad time management skills, and they're not where they want to be. And I've seen the opposite too.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's really helpful. We have another question just asking, can you explain what the process is of actually publishing a research paper? Is there a website that we might be able to go to? Where have you helped kids publish before?
Absolutely. So we've helped publish kids about 10 or 11 newspapers in the past. There's one in particular that I recommend because I think that it's more friendly towards students. A lot of these academic journals, by the way, you're competing against like PhDs and things like that as a student, which is obviously quite difficult. The one that I've pasted is called Lens. It's one that we know well, and it's one that really prioritizes students. So I think that that's one to consider. And if you would like more information on it, just check out the website and read some of the research papers on there.
Thanks, Debbie. That's really helpful. Folks, does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask at this point in time that we haven't already managed to cover?
I see one quick question from Vasilia. Does she need to take a summer program at ART University, or any university is fine? I think that it would depend on where she plans to apply to, Vasilia, but more than happy to, answer this question offline and maybe get a little more context to see where else she's applying for. Because I know she's been working with us, so we can take this one offline, if that's okay. I see another question. Amy, my son is an avid gamer. Can he publish a paper on that? Absolutely. He can publish a game on anything he wants. He can talk about, the gaming culture and the gaming industry. Some of the research papers that we've had published across academic journals are on very, very wide range of topics. So I would 100% recommend, Amy, that you take that interest of your child and translate it into something bigger, because you will see what that does for his mindset, and it's quite powerful. Any other questions? Looks like we're right on time. Oh, one more question. What level would a research paper have to be at in terms of data collection and rigor? Good question. Depends on the journal. The higher the rigor, the better. If you'd like to have a quick peek at the website, I poured in the chat just to see what level of data that has. That's a good proxy. But I would say having, a strong hypothesis, having, reasonable data collection, very strong analysis and references, those are sort of the key components to get published. And then if you're really looking at the top journals like the Concord Review, then you should really be looking at comparative analysis. So comparative analysis is, really looking at what other researchers are saying about the same topic. How do we compare that? How do we contrast that? Going beyond. So I think it depends, to answer your question, Anahi, but I would apply to a lot of different research journals because they are competitive, and, you won't know where you will get into. All right, guys, I think we'll pause right here. But I hope the session was helpful for everyone. I see a lot of people that I know, but a lot of people that I don't as well. And got a couple of messages that I will reply to ASAP. But thank you guys for joining, and hope you have a lovely Sunday ahead.
Thank you for being with us, Debbie. We really appreciate your time, of course. And thank you, everyone, for coming. It's been awesome to have you here as guests, and thank you for asking such insightful questions at the same point in time. It's been a pleasure for us to be able to answer them for you. We hope to see you on Wednesday. We'll explain a bit more about activities as well and how to sort of source your things. But if you can't join, no worries. We will try. Please feel free to message us, Debbie, myself, Millie. I will put her email, our emails, in fact, into the webinar chat, and please feel free to just message us with any questions that you have. But have a lovely Sunday. Enjoy.
Thank you, guys.